Welcome to the Murphy, Sam, and Jodi After the Show podcast, brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Just a few days left, until Father's Day. And so they've got at omahasteaks.com, great way for you to save and give Dad some of his favorite stuff. And we have a code for you at the end of the podcast that we will give you to save a little extra money. And speaking of Father's Day, both Sam and I are dads, of course. And I would say that it's my favorite job, period. It has been, and when anybody asks me about that, that's exactly the way Jodi is. I said it's the favorite job that I've ever had. I love being a dad to our two daughters. It's been amazing. Hard to believe that they are 23. Sailor's about to be 24 in August.
Yes.
Yeah. And then our youngest, Phoebes, is 20. And it's crazy to look back and think about, all the fun and all that. And I'm looking forward to seeing them on Sunday. Of course, I will not be able to see my dad. You won't either, Sam.
Yeah.
My dad passed away at the beginning of 2021, and so I was just thinking about just some of the wonderful things about him and the legacy that he left behind. And I think that's an important story to share. That's kind of where I'm going with this. I don't know if I got somehow oddly inspired by Jodi and I watching Pee Wee Herman's biopic this week, but I just started thinking about, people telling their life story. Mm-hmm. And I do think at some point, I know that Phoebe, our youngest, wants Jodi and I to do the same thing, wants us to tell her our stories. But I want to make sure that I actually memorialize my dad because I have so much video, and we're really blessed to have films from his early childhood. I mean, I can literally put together something for, our kids and family members of the future that spans almost his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And save that story for him. And so that's an important project to me that, I want to work on. But thinking back to my own childhood, about my dad and the things that, he meant, he was so cool and so different in so many ways, as we've talked about, that there were just little things that still to this day, if I look in the sky and there's a contrail, which of course is the trail up behind a jet, it's my dad who first explained that to us. And because we went to air shows as kids, he was a huge aviation buff. Me and my brother and sister can pretty well point out planes and tell you what models they are, for the most part, like large commercial jets and that sort of thing. And every time we flew, there was always a story about, the takeoff and the landing. And here's why the jet's doing this, that, and the other. It's all that stuff just stuck with you. And to me, those are the unique little special things that a dad brings, sometimes they're little tidbits. Sometimes they're the big life lessons on things. My dad was a very quiet person. Mm-hmm. And he, so when he spoke or he said something, it's amazing how much weight that carried.
Of course.
And he didn't have to raise his voice,
Because the less you say,
right,
the more impactful.
Yeah, and so some of those things were as simple as when I was 10 years old, because I remember it vividly, of all things. I like most kids, you see something, you want something, you bug the what out of your parents, and you're not necessarily going to get it. And it was a moped, of all things. Oh. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, a motorized bike. And I kept asking and asking and asking. And, my dad finally said, and it was very calm, he was not angry. He said, you're going to have to learn a lot of responsibility before you get on a bike. You can't, you're going to you have to, I don't remember what he pointed out that I was doing that was probably some juvenile, just kid thing, being a kid with my brother and sister and being silly. And he was trying to explain, if you're going to get on a motorized bike like this, you have to have a certain sense of responsibility. And that really woke me up more than anything else. I think I grew up really fast in that moment. The next thing I know, the next year, because both of my grandfathers had passed, there was nobody to look after us when we were little, my brother and sister and I. So during the summer, starting at the age of 10, I was responsible for looking after my brother and sister. Mm-hmm. And, we were pretty young to be all left at home. I guess that's why they call Gen X the latchkey generation, because we were young to be left at home with it, but both my parents had to work. Yeah,
I mean, yeah,
and
we were too.
Yeah, and
at least we didn't have the internet to get us in trouble.
Yeah.
No, we had to create our own trouble.
But we didn't. They had taken us to different types of daycares. There weren't many good camps. We didn't like really any of the experiences, and so that same conversation came up again. That if you want to stay by yourself, then you're going to have to be responsible. You're going to have to look after the house. You're going to have to know what happens when somebody knocks on the door. You're going to have to know what happens how to handle somebody calling on the phone or whatever. My dad was the guy that he was fun. He was cool. He was funny. He battled alcoholism, but honestly, in the early days of his drinking, he was hilarious.
Yes.
But then he was also dry for 30 years. And so later in life, I learned about acceptance and his approach to life on things and his unbelievable strength for somebody who was so introverted and so quiet. Mm-hmm. And so those things aren't ever lost. But, that's kind of the story that I want to tell to our girls and all that, and do it through pictures. Mm-hmm. Not like anything else.
They knew him, though, too.
They
So
did. They'll
absolutely appreciate
knew him.
it.
Well,
It's not just something that, it's not just seeing a picture of someone they never knew.
Yeah.
It will have real impact.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful that they got to experience a side of my dad that you and I, Jodi, didn't initially see a whole lot of before my mom passed. My mom was a very powerful figure. She really was the matriarch and the lead of the family as we grew up. And it's not that my dad wasn't strong, but she was the one who was hands-on. She was the really vocal one. And when she passed, my dad seemed to kind of come out of his shell. He was all about the spontaneity. If we wanted to call him last minute and say, hey, we're going to go grab dinner, you want to come with us? He was like, yeah, I'm in, come pick me up. Mm-hmm. And my mom would have never done that. It was like this, too much preparation involved in that. So
she was not spontaneous.
Right. And so our girls loved that. And they loved the way that he talked. They loved his mannerisms. So I'm grateful that they got to experience that too. But the reason I say that is it's also the struggle. Okay, where am I going to find the time to put that together?
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do it in pieces and parts. So at least we've started that. I transferred all those films to digital a couple of years ago that are like my grandfather's films, so that at least those are preserved within the family. That's a start. Mm-hmm. It may be unfinished things that somebody else will have to finish at some point, but at least the groundwork is laid there for them. But to me, that's what Father's Day is about, at least for me. And I know both of you, we're all in the same situation because all of us have lost our dads. Jodi, you were the first, at the age of 16 to lose him.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to say, you doing all of this, you keep saying that you want to do it for Taylor and Phoebe and for the family, and where it will be a gift for the family. But you also need to do it for yourself. It's part of your grieving process, is to fill yourself with as much of his memory as you can. Yeah. You just don't realize it. You want to do it for them and to honor your dad for the right reason, but you do need it. Part of grieving is quiet and private. It's internal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that grieving is internal because only you can grieve your dad. Yeah. Your brother and sister, you share in that, but you don't grieve them. You don't grieve him the same way as they do. So grieving is very personal, and I think you're a doer type. So when you have a feeling, you need to say it or do something about it. So I think this is also part of your process.
Yeah.
And it'll help you.
And he's been gone for 4.5 years now. So
which is soon. It's still soon.
It's still soon, but time heals things. It's a lot easier now than it was at first.
Sure.
At first, it was the shock. Actually, there was a lot of anger about it at first, too.
Yep.
But but at a moment, you'll have little things that'll hit you, along the way. Jodi and I were driving past, we were on a road trip, and we drove past a drag strip that, I don't know that if it's still in use today or not, but I explained to Jodi that in the 1960s, my dad, he bought his first motorcycle when he was 16 years old. He bought his second motorcycle when he was 18. He was really, as you all know, and he had a Harley later in life. He loved riding his motorcycle. That was one of his things. And so he took it out to the drag strip one day and actually won. Oh. It was like that.
Such a Dane story.
Yeah, I don't know what they call it, stock cars, stock bikes or whatever, just a casual racer. And and he did. And so we still have the trophy for it. And that he won that day. But I remember him telling the story that he didn't tell, and he was basically a young adult when he did that. Yeah. He was legal, but right. But he did not tell my grandparents for a couple of years that he had
done it.
That's smart. Yeah.
He got the bike up to 120 miles an hour.
Whoa!
But it's
120 on a bike.
I know.
Dane.
Yeah, but just little stories like that, that are just fun.
Did you ever get the moped?
No. And
you weren't responsible enough.
Right. And I'm glad I didn't. Because honestly, once I grew up, I realized, well, this thing won't go very fast. By By that time, he was letting us ride the motorcycles. So,
Oh, wow. Yeah, you didn't need a moped then.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true.
Exactly.
Sam, do you have anything like that you do you talk to your kids about your dad? Or they knew him,
Well,
but not like you
Sammy
knew him.
and Will knew him. Sammy was 20, Will was 15 when he passed away. The twins and Jack were
Little
young.
bitty.
Yeah.
So he died 15 years ago?
2009, 16 years ago.
16 years ago. Oh, wow. Okay.
So they really never knew Pop Pop. I mean, they knew Pop Pop by name, and I've got pictures of them in Pop Pop, but it's like they didn't know.
Yeah.
Had they known him, even Sammy and Will, I don't think knew this. Had they known him, they would understand where my sense of humor comes from.
Sure.
Because basically every joke out of my mouth is based on not based on, but it's my dad's inspiration.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was watching shows that I had no business watching, not because of the content, but because, as a kid, most kids my age, they weren't watching Three Stooges or Jackie Gleason show reruns.
Right.
And my dad was Benny Hill, into all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and watch it with him.
Yeah.
And I would die laughing. It's just like, this is so funny. And that's where that and the cooking and comedy. That's where I got from my dad.
Fantastic.
Yeah. My dad cooked pretty much every day. My mom cooked, the big stuff like the fried chicken or the home cooked good old got it from her mom recipes. But my dad was the one who would come home every day after work.
Recipes, right?
What'd I say?
Recipes?
Oh.
I'm just asking, with recipes, or he would just cook?
He's the one who also had all the newspaper cooking sections every week. He had subscriptions to Food and Wine, Gourmet, and all those. And that was, just like I've told you before about cookbooks, those were his casual reading. And some of them he'd rip out a page and try and make it and pass it off on us. And it's like, no, that's too frou-frou for us. Just go grill some hamburgers.
Oh, God.
But I remember my dad, I still have that picture in my head of him in the kitchen cooking something. He's come home from work, left his work shirt on, which, a button-down collared shirt. He put some pajama shorts on. And he's still got his black calf-high socks and hard-sole shoes on.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That picture in the kitchen, that's how he would cook, like that. And it's like,
He was comfortable.
Yeah.
I guess that's how he was comfortable.
Yeah.
But see, you can tell a story out of that. The story comes from however the story evolved in the first place. You know what I mean? And because you have all of his recipes and great memories of that. And those are, that's an easy way to share your dad with your children and your grandchildren, it lives on that way. And I think that's super cool. Did y'all ever really clean out all of the recipes yet? Has that ever been completely gone through, or does your mom still have a whole file cabinet full of them?
I think she didn't. Didn't she just recently find a bunch again, or you did?
I don't know if she's gone through the file cabinet yet, because he had a desk that had a 2-drawer file cabinet that was all recipes.
Yeah.
And I know she gave me some of his recipes, and then you got some of his recipes, Jody. But I don't know if those are from the file cabinets or what. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to mess with your train of thought earlier when you were talking about him cooking in the kitchen, but whenever you start to talk about your dad and cooking, recipes jump to my brain, because you don't know this, but of all the family I've ever had in my life and all the experiences I've ever had, especially with cookbooks and cooking and recipes, it was never a man collecting them.
Yeah.
That stood out to me when I first met you, and I met your parents and Sam, and you were telling me about your dad having stacks and stacks of recipes. I was like, your dad? Really? Because in my experience and in my family, it's the women that do that. I mean, I have cookbooks that belong to my grandmother. I have cookbooks that belong to Murphy's grandmother. And I think that's cool that he just, if it was his interest, go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's where I got it. And, today, Sammy, my oldest, he cooks a lot. I mean, his wife, Melissa, cooks. They both cook. But Sammy will, get in the kitchen, find something in a cookbook and decide, I want to try to make this.
It's creative and necessary anyway.
It's really, that's another, to me, big fun share from dads, or really, I guess, family in general, but dads, are hobbies or just likes that they had. The biggest one for me from my dad, which was the most impactful that he passed on to me, other than responsibility and leadership, really was music. I mean, music was always on in the house. Now the TV was always on too, and I know we watched
Wow.
a lot of
Yes.
TV as kids, but Friday night was always music night. Friday night was party night. Basically, it was nothing but music, and he introduced me to so many different things. He played in a little band when he was in high school. And I always thought that was kind of cool. And in his later life, somebody found one of their recordings.
Oh, cool.
It's not a great recording of it, but it's them practicing, and so we still have that today, which is crazy cool. But but music was his big hobby and his love, and the other things he loved his rain gauge. For whatever he was a weather, kind of a weather fanatic anyway, but mostly it was the rain gauge. Anytime there was he would always, that's one thing that he would manage and change every day. He would actually keep records of it too.
He was a record keeper.
He was a record keeper because of what he did, I guess, for a living as a laboratory technician at Exxon. And, it's back before, I guess, computers did a lot of the analysis on chemicals and all that. Quality control was the department that he was in. And so it was all about logging. You had to log everything. And I think he loved that. Because even in his final days, he would go through every single day, every day, literally with his 401k, and he was making notes and this, that, and the other. It was kind of overkill, but you know what? That was my dad. It's what he loved doing.
It's him being himself.
He was an enthusiast. Yes, exactly. And so those little quirky things and the hobbies are really cool shares, and to me very interesting because everybody's got a different hobby. And what I was getting at is your dad, it wasn't just about cooking food to put it on the table. He had a love for it. It was his happy spot. And that's super, super cool.
He tried many dishes on us that were probably good, but they were too fancy for us. I mean, because for us, Sunday dinner was like the big one. My aunt came over, and we had a big family Sunday dinner every Sunday without fail.
Right.
And by big, I meant the four of us and my aunt. But he'd like to experiment on those. And I remember the time he made this salad that was, lettuce. It had a pineapple ring and cheddar cheese on top. And they served it to us.
And you were like,
yeah, I mean, even my mom and my aunt were like, so we gave him a hard time a lot of times about some of those dishes.
Sure.
But,
Yeah.
that was the family.
Yeah.
That's how it goes in families.
Yeah.
Well,
Now, the one thing I did not get from my dad is his attention to detail, and I know you're going to say bull.
What?
Yeah, that's
No,
true,
no,
'cause
no.
you are a detail person.
My dad, he had no patience, but he had patience when he needed it. He when he was in school, he was in for architecture for a short time. So some of the furniture in our house, the patio cover, he built a shed. He built all that. He designed it. I've got drawing. He built my kitchen table that I have today. He built my mom's, and I've got the drawings so he knew what he was doing with all that. And when it came to that stuff and cooking, he took his time. And it didn't matter how long it took.
Nice.
I'm going to follow the directions. We're going to make it right. And, we're going to get it down to an eighth of an inch, millimeter period. It's going to work. I don't have that.
Right.
Cooking, I do. But that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
I don't have the time or the patience or the stuff for that.
Yeah. We live in a time where I think that can be challenging for anybody, right? I mean,
It's not as patient a culture.
Most of us are not as most of us are not as patient. My dad did that early on too. He was into building things. My grandfather though was my grandfather died when I was 10, and that's another one. He's the dad figure that I wish I had known. I wish he'd lived a little bit longer, just so that I could have intellectually known him better, because everybody talks about just what an interesting guy he was. He was from that greatest generation. He was born in 1912. He died in 1979. And so he was of that generation where you just, if the lawnmower broke, you need to figure out how to fix it. And he would do that. He could take a lawnmower apart and put it back together. He could take apart a car engine and put it back together.
I envy that skill.
He was the guy that, if a storm came through, he was outside, even in his 50s, climbing up in trees with his, saws and cutting things down. He, I describe he and my dad really the same way. They were both just really cool dudes. I don't know how else to explain that. And there's film footage of my grandfather. I've only got one audio tape of my grandfather, and he's way in the background from Christmas in 1977. It was cool to be able to hear his voice because I was so young when he died. I could not remember his voice. Right. And so there's that one little fingerprint of his voice, in that tape. But once I heard that, I reconnected with it. Like, that's who he was. And he really was the epicenter. My grandmother was such a matriarch, but my grandfather was a really strong figure, in that family. And my dad and his, two brothers worshipped him. And my uncles are still alive today, and it's still the same thing. They will always talk about Skipper. And it's funny, they'll call him Dad, but they call him by his nickname Skipper, too, because he was that kind of, he could fix anything, he could build anything, he could draw anything. The other thing that he did, and I won't go into great detail with it because it was a very personal letter to my uncle about military service. And my grandfather served in World War II and was deeply patriotic, like a lot of World War II veterans in that generation, were. And not that people aren't today, but at that time period, right? And so he was a big believer in serving the country. And I guess one of my uncles was wrestling with, do I do this or not? It was during Vietnam, which was a very polarizing time, right, for everybody. And he wrote him a very direct letter about the pros and cons and the ways, to think about it, so that he was considering, all angles. And I wouldn't call it an admonishment. It was really more of a, look, if you take this oath basically and you're going into the military, this is what the responsibility, is. And here's what it does for the country. And if you don't want to do that, then you don't do that. But if you don't do that, you need to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And I'll leave it, at that. But it was it was really the first time I'd ever seen anything, like that, and sort of the fatherly guidance from him. So he was the balance of all those, all of those things. He was also a very strong father figure. So, it's Father's Day weekend coming up, so I just figured talking about dads. But Jodi, before we go, you need to talk about your dad. You don't want to?
I don't talk about my dad a lot if I'm not ready.
Okay.
Because, people don't talk to me about him anymore. My dad's been gone, 30 years now? Mm-hmm. You guys are not at that place yet where people don't talk about your dad anymore. But I am.
Because they don't
remember him.
Right.
Or, I'm not in circles. I'm not in rooms all the time or often at all with people who remember my father.
Yeah.
And the ones who do, like my mother and her siblings, my aunts and uncles, at Christmas, they'll speak to me about him.
Yeah.
At the right time when stories come up, I'm ready for it then. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what's something that you don't know about grief until grief is long for you. You don't know that in 30 years, one of the sad things for you is that you will reach a point where you're the only one missing that person. I feel like that's where I am. And that's okay. You know what I mean? I don't try to keep him present constantly. I don't do that. Yeah. I do think of him almost every day because of what you said. There are things that will always make you think of your father.
Yeah.
That you see every day, a bird, whatever. But that's a part of grief you can't know until you're 30 years into it. And I don't walk around like this all the time.
Oh, I know that.
You know that.
Yeah, I didn't even mean to upset you on it.
I know.
So, but what I think is really beautiful about that, I know that it's been a long time, but the 16 years that you had with him literally carved out who you are today, or molded you into who you are today. And the things that
one thing
I know, but the things that you respect, and but I guess my point is, even though you only had him for those 16 years, everything that he did for you in those 16 years is still part of you today.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course it is. Anyway, I didn't mean to get upset. I'm sorry.
You don't need to apologize for that. That's understandable. So, and I didn't mean to make this only about lost dads. I was just thinking about I know we do have that in common. I know.
Yeah, when you've lost your dad, you think of them on Father's Day. Although our Father's Day this weekend will be fun.
Absolutely, it will be.
We're having your family over.
Which I'm looking forward to, and we'll talk about my dad then, I'm sure.
A lot of conversation about Dane because that's where it makes the most sense. That's where he's alive still, especially. Yeah. And then on Sunday, I can't tell you exactly what we're doing because it's a surprise. But
just tell me then.
Anyway, it's going to be fun, and you'll go into dad joke mode, and
will I?
It'll be a day to celebrate you.
And one thing that just occurred to me too about not having a dad is for Father's Day, I'm now the next level. Or I'm the top level. Mm-hmm. Whereas when it was my dad's Father's Day, it was up to me and Mom and my brother to figure something out, do something, whatever. And so it's like, I don't have to anymore.
No.
But now my kids
hopefully it comes to you.
Yeah, well, it usually does. Sammy has something up his sleeve usually. But, now it's my turn.
Yeah.
I don't know how, I'm not putting it right, but
yeah,
it's like I don't have to do it anymore, but, I'm the one now.
Yeah, I understand that. And the other part of that, too, is it's interesting to go to a place where you're wishing others Happy Father's Day or Happy Mother's Day that are younger than you, but they're parents and in their world. And you know what I mean? It's like paying that forward, Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's a different.
It's my turn to step up.
It's a different
and get all the goodies.
It's a different change.
I will tell you one little quick thing before we wrap this is that on Saturday evening when we have the little Father's Day get together at our house, which is kind of like a present for you, Murphy, with your brother and sister, every dad there, which I've counted, it's really going to be only 4, but every dad there, one of them is a dad to be, going to get a little something special.
Okay.
Just so you know.
Sweet.
Even the dad to be.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be coming.
That's so sweet. Well, happy Father's Day.
Missed any part of the show? Get it all on the Murphy, Sam, and Jodi podcast.